Welcome to Questions from the Closet. I'm Ben Shalati.
And I'm Charlie Bird. Each episode, we discuss a question we're commonly asked as LGBTQ+ Latter-day Saints.
We're not trying to answer this question or come to a consensus, but simply sharing our perspectives. Today's question is, what if I feel like a failure?
Ben and I are not terribly diverse, and we share many opinions and life experiences. For example, we both love the ocean.
However, there are some pretty big differences. For example, I don't like snorkeling. But, Charlie, I have something to tell you. That's a lie. I like snorkeling.
Really? I knew you would if you went. You just got to get like the nice, once you figure out the snorkel, it's really nice.
Yeah. So this is what happened. I went snorkeling once in Florida, like in the open ocean, like 10 years ago. It was awful.
In Florida?
No, yeah. Mask filled with
No
water.
offense to anyone from Florida.
It was awful. I hated it. Drank a lot of seawater. Terrible. Went in Hawaii. Same thing. Did not work.
Really?
Yeah. So right now I'm on the Caribbean island of Bonaire, which has some of the best snorkeling and scuba diving in the world. And so I went, and it was so terrifying. The water was like pushing me towards all this coral, and I was getting water in my mask. I was like, this is awful. I'm not a strong swimmer. And then I tried snorkeling without the snorkel, just like with the goggles on. That was way better. But I had to come up for air all the time, and that was tiresome. And then, then my friend, Joey, who I'm here with, told me that the mask looked too small for me, that my nose was like, didn't fit in the nose guard or whatever.
You got a beak.
So I have an adult mask on, but my nose was too big. Once I got a mask on that fit and it like suctioned right, it was amazing. And so we went snorkeling yesterday. It was awesome, and I loved it. So now I guess I like snorkeling. But when we set up this similarity difference, I did not.
Well, that's really exciting. I don't really snorkel anymore because I got scuba certified. So most of the time I just dive. And also, as we're talking about it, like I do love the ocean, but it's also terrifying. Like
What?
the ocean is so scary as a
Because
whole. Just like, have you ever like swam out far in the ocean?
no, I'm smarter than that.
Oh, it's very scary. I
Yeah.
always do it to get like a little rush,
Well, what the
but
current
it scares
when you die.
me. No, I'm a strong swimmer. I was a lifeguard.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I'm not a strong swimmer. I was never taught how to swim properly. I've never taken a swim lesson. Like I can swim, but I'm not a strong swimmer.
I should give you swim lessons.
Let's do it.
We like to provide a variety of voices and perspectives, and today we're joined by Joey Shephard.
Hello.
So tell us a
Hey,
bit about
Joey, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how's it going?
Great. Joey, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yep, I'm Joey, pronouns they, them. Identify as queer, genderqueer. I identify as currently active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I also say that I leave the church every week. I just somehow ended up back in church on Sunday. I really love the ocean. It is really freaky at times as well. But I live here on Bonaire now.
Do you live there like that's your home now?
That is my home for the next year, yes.
Wow, what are you doing there?
I'm house sitting for good friends of mine that are traveling the world. So,
Oh, that's really cool.
yeah. I'm gonna, anyways, yeah, I just finished my master's at BYU and I deferred my PhD for a year so I can spend more time. What is my millennial phrase I keep saying? Reconnect with God, myself, and those I love for the next year. So, yeah. Professionally, I do research. I'm not a therapist. If you want a therapist, you can go to Ben or Charlie. But I do research that hopefully can support the work that they do. I probably research religious parents who have questioning, like LGBTQ questioning children. And yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and Joey and I have been on Bonaire together for the last 2 weeks almost, and we have had so many adventures and so many chats and so much gelato. So,
Yes.
There's gelato in Bonaire.
yeah. So Bonaire is technically part of the Netherlands. It's part of the Caribbean
Mhm.
Netherlands. So there's a lot of
Dutch.
yeah. So it's like Guam is to the U.S.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Cool.
All right, fantastic. So yeah, Joey and I have been on Bonaire for the last 2 weeks, and we're in the same house right now, but in different rooms. We could be on different Wi-Fi's, and I'm in the room I'm staying in, which is like a tween girls' room. So if I turned my computer around, you would see like Bratz dolls, and there's a mirror in here that says "Shut up, you look good," and it's been making me look good all week.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's
Also, lots of
awesome.
Harry Potter paraphernalia in here. So great, great stuff all around. All
Yeah.
right. Well, let's get to the topic. So, Joey, tell us why this topic of feeling like a failure is something that you want to address on the podcast.
Well, I guess it's because I sometimes feel like I am. So I feel like this is a question that I have felt but not thought of at times, and I've never like thought to send it into the podcast because it's not something that I felt like could be answered because it's just something that I feel at times. Um, but I have this suspicion. You both are therapists, so you probably know better than me. That a lot of people feel this way, and I think there's power in discussing things that we feel but don't feel we can talk about. So, especially in the realm of being queer and a member of the church, I think there's a lot of aspects that I feel like I'm failing, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that too. So,
Yeah.
Are you comfortable with me asking some questions about that?
yeah, sure.
Um, well, first of all, I think it's really brave to even like say that. I can tell this is a vulnerable thing. I'm curious, you said there's like some aspects with being queer and being a member of the church that like make you feel like you're failing. Could you share some of those aspects?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I thought by coming out with pronouns and um, wearing clothes that I felt were more comfortable with my identity and who I am as a person um, would be helpful, and it has been helpful in a lot of ways. I also think that like recently, like I started going back to the temple again, and I've been much more active in church than I ever have been. It's a little hard not to be when I live on an island where I served as missionary, and I know all the members, and they're like, "Hey, why aren't you at church? We don't care if you're queer," you know. Um, but like even on so just on paper, like I just graduated from BYU. I got 2 degrees in 6 years. I have a PhD I'm going to next year. I had my temple recommend and went back to the temple first time in a long time. Um, I'm still struggling to feel like sometimes I have a place, and more than that, I'm not sure I still love the temple. Like I can go now, but I'm not sure I feel there all the time. I still have questions about the church. Right now, like there's a member who really wants me to be in the branch presidency, and I don't know how I feel about that because that's a very like gendered calling, and I struggle with the genderedness of the church for me personally. And so I feel like even though I've been progressing and becoming more of myself, it's also opened opportunities for me to like fail and mess up as well.
Yeah. Joe, as you've heard other people talk about, their experiences being LGBTQ saints, what other experiences of failure have you heard people talk about?
Well, I think some that come to my mind is like I've tried dating before and I failed at that. Like dating is hard if you're gay or straight, it just sucks. um even becoming more myself, I've struggled to still make connections and feel like myself more of the time. Um I've worked with a lot of parents, and I feel like a lot of parents feel like they're failing as parents either because they have a queer kid or because their queer kid isn't going to church, or they are going to church but they don't like church, or whatever being the reason. And I don't know, I was thinking about it, and I think in some aspects like I am failing in some ways, um, but it's through those failures that like I've come closer to God. And like what does it say in Alma, like that I wasn't forced to be humble or something like that, right? I've been really lax on my scripture study for a while. Um, and I don't know, it's hard to tell myself this, but I think for other people, especially like the parents that I work with, like you're doing better than you think you are. Like, for example, you're talking to like me, like I'm not a parent, but I am a queer person, I'm a child, and as a child I would say like you're doing better than you think because you're here right now. And I think that goes also for like if you're queer and in the church and or you're out of the church and you're listening to this and you're just trying to figure out what to do, like the fact you're like listening to this podcast means that you're trying and you're doing better than you think. At least that's what's on my mirror. Like, shut up, you look good. I'm like, no, like you're doing better than you think.
Yes. I do like that very much. Joe, when you said, we should talk about this on the podcast, I was thinking, I don't really feel like this isn't something I experience all, like feeling like I'm a failure. Like I try really hard, do my best. And of course, sometimes I fail things and something like, oh, I wish I'd done that better. But I usually feel pretty good and have a pretty good sense of self-esteem. But then I remembered what happened when I was 30 and the immense failure I felt. So when I was 30, I had a little dating experience with my friend Jordan, and that ended right as I was moving to Peru for the summer. And when I got to Peru, Jordan was like, "Hey, we can't be friends anymore. This isn't going to work out. If you can't date me for real, then we can't be together, blah, blah, blah." And that ended. I was super sad about that. I would even say depressed. And then I got fired. Like my job in Peru fired me halfway through the summer. And I was in northern Peru, like pretty close to Ecuador, and I got fired, and I had to come back to the U.S., but I couldn't get a flight out for like 5 days, and I planned a trip to Ecuador, like in those 5 days. So I was like, I'm not going to go to Ecuador. My partner who I was working with said, no, still go, like have your adventures. I went to Ecuador by myself for the weekend, and just like felt terrible the whole time, had an awful time, and my mom had given me this ring when I left on my mission that said "Return with Honor" on it that I still wore, and I remember looking at that like, I am not returning with honor after my summer in Peru. Like I failed, like I have been fired. And that felt really terrible. And then I got back to the US. I told Jordan that I had changed my mind and I was going to pick him over the church. And then he said, no, thank you. You would choose a church over me in the future. So I couldn't even like have this person I loved. And in the middle of all this, I was in a PhD program that I didn't like, that I didn't want to go back to and didn't want to finish. And it was like everything in my life had fallen apart. And I felt like I was failing at everything, except in my classes. I was getting straight A's in my classes. So yay for the win. I guess nothing but A's. I don't want to use gendered or call them straight A's. Who knows how they self-identified. So in the midst of all this, like I am fired, I am embarrassed. I'd had this relationship that ended. I hate my program, and I go home to Washington, where all my family lives, and we're sitting around dinner, like all of us, and then just like spontaneously, everyone starts telling stories of when they had been fired. And we're laughing our heads off because everyone in my family at some point had been fired from a job, like mostly just like small things, but everyone had been fired. And we're just like laughing. And that made me feel so much better. Just like knowing that other people had been in a very similar position to I bet one of my brothers had even been fired 3 times from jobs. He's very successful now. And that was just like so healing for me. And I don't know like what makes people feel like different things make different people feel better. But for me, like if we'd sat around, I'd be like, I'm fired, I'm sad. If I'm like, oh yeah, that's hard. This thing happened and I'm having this hard time too. Like that isn't what I needed. Like I didn't need to commiserate. I didn't need to like feel sad. I like needed the laughter and the seeing that other people were going through the same thing. And then, I just kind of like pulled it all back together. I was like, you know what? I can do one more semester of my program. And I did, and then I ended up finishing. And I just like kind of got to put everything like that was a moment that happened. And it was a long, hard moment, but I was able to move through it. And Charlie, I'm wondering, are there ever moments when you felt like you were failing?
Probably, but I actually had another thought that I wanted to share if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
Joey, as you were talking, I noticed that a lot of the things, I guess I'm curious to know, like, by what standards are we considering ourselves a failure? Because when you were talking, Joey, it sounded like it wasn't so much as like failures, but this like lack of perfection or lack of like meeting unrealistic expectations you had for yourself. Is that, I don't want to like put words into your
You're a
mouth.
therapist, that's for sure.
Well, because I heard you say like I'm doing all these amazing things and yet I'm not doing them perfectly, or I still struggle internally with whether or not it's where I want to be. And so it was like, and you mentioned all of these like external things that you thought would make you feel completely fulfilled, and you're doing the external things, and there's parts of you that still have conflict or tension or like struggle with certain aspects of your identity, your faith, your career. Um, and so I guess I'm curious, like, how that lack of perfection translates into I'm a failure.
Um, is it okay if I share an experience I had recently that got me started thinking about this?
Yeah.
Um, so I see, um, I've occasionally visited a prisoner in prison, David, and he been locked up for like almost a decade, and he's Christian and queer, and has never met anyone who's queer in prison, and has never talked to anyone who's Christian and queer. And so as I started visiting him, I was the first one to really talk to him, and I think I just realized he felt like he was failing for the past like so many years. I mean, he obviously had done something to end up in prison, but uh, just as I was hearing him, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you spend your money because no one visits you in prison. You spend that money on buying gifts for the prisoners who don't have money to like buy shoes or like jackets or things." And I'm like, "You're doing great. Like, you still care. You still pray to God. Like, you're trying. Like, you're doing good enough." And realizing that God probably feels the same about me, and that it's almost within me feeling like I'm failing, or that the fact that I'm not perfect, that I'm not living up to expectations, that I will never be able to. Um, that I not only draw closer to God, but I was able to draw closer to David, and he was able to draw closer to me, and he felt so seen and heard in ways that like I didn't even know. Like, it was so meaningful to him just to know that he wasn't alone in that struggle. Um, and so just thinking about it, I guess I just also, the thing is, some people probably have already figured this out. I'm like 26. I'm pretty young. You know, y'all have already probably figured this out. But I think in my mind, I'm just like, especially other people's like perceptions of me. I think a lot of things I just mentioned are things that other people have mentioned to me. But you have a PhD you're going to next year. Like, this, take this gap year. It's good for you. Like, oh my gosh, you're so amazing. You're living in the Caribbean. Wow. Like, I wish I could do that. Like, a lot of this external, I think they're trying to validate, but it's hard because I feel like, oh, but they don't know this or they don't know that in the back of my head. Um,
So you feel like a little bit of an imposter.
yeah. Or I guess I have at times, and I guess I realize that I don't. The For me, the solution has been to talk about it, and not to talk about it, but also to hear someone else talk about it. And so, my thought process was, you know what, I can get vulnerable and talk about all the ways I feel like I'm messing up in some ways, and if that can help anybody like who's struggling, whether it be a queer who's still single, or someone who's struggling with their transition with their pronouns and names and feeling like, I thought this name was my like name and it's not, and how do I tell my family again now, like, or parents who are struggling with their kids, like, that if there's any, that hopefully you'll feel less alone in your lack of perfection, knowing that, um, that I'm not either, that we're not either. um, Especially, I don't know, Charlie and Ben, I don't know for either of you, but um, I feel like being, like having written books and having this podcast, that a lot of people perhaps compare themselves to you, even if internally, not externally to you. Um, that perhaps it's this idea that so like they have to like be you or live up to you, and how like, I mean, I think Ben, you've shared that story before, but I remember you sharing that story before, at least to me personally, and feeling like, oh my gosh, wow, like if Ben got fired from a job, like it's okay that my car got impounded, like.
Joe, one of the things that I'm hearing you say is that even with successes in your life, sometimes it can be hard to notice or focus on those, but also it can be really helpful to see that we're not alone, that even people that we look up to have mistakes, or things in their life aren't always perfect. And yeah.
Well, I heard that in your story too, Ben. You shared about how like all of a sudden your family started talking about every time they got fired from a job and how amazing that was, and you laughed and it was great. And like, I'm hearing that how much that helped you, and I saw how much that helped David, and I don't know, Charlie, like, you probably have more questions to ask me, but I guess I would like to hear on your side. Have there been times in your life that you felt that, or?
Oh, absolutely. Like, there's been so many times that I've tried for something and felt like I was actually just talking about it with, I ran into one of my old high school coaches a couple days ago because I was at home in Missouri, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I remember when you ran for student body president your sophomore year and you put like together this big production. I worked for like months on this production, this huge campaign, and I like performed and I like really cared and I wanted it so bad. Um, and then I lost the election because somebody threw out candy. Like somebody else threw out candy and didn't prepare a speech. They're just like, I don't have a speech, but here's some candy. And everyone voted for them. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hate everything. I tried so hard and I'm so embarrassed. And I put my heart out on the line and showed everyone how much I cared, and nobody cared about me. And I mean, I feel like every person alive just has this Rolodex of things they've tried, but it hasn't like come to fruition the way they wanted. Um, and that's like, when I think about it, it's like one of my most embarrassing moments. I don't know why it's embarrassing to care about something. I don't know why it feels embarrassing to care. And then, like, if other people don't care, if you don't, like, get it the way you want it. I'm not sure where that comes from. But, Joey, as you were talking, I was thinking, like, this is, like, so indicative of the plan of salvation. Like, we are literally come here to fail. That is our job on earth, is to fail as we try to become like Christ and then use the atonement to make up for our failures. So it's almost like this inverse like way of thinking that like if we don't feel like we're ever failing, then we completely remove the necessity of a savior, and then that's like Satan's plan.
Yeah,
And I don't know, I feel like it's so easy to see in everybody else, but it's hard to see in yourself.
yeah, 100%. Charlie, is it okay if I comment on something you just said?
Yeah.
Um, you were just sharing. You're like, um, I don't know why, like it's an embarrassing moment for caring so much, and at least for me, I think it's the fact that like I cared so much about this thing, like sharing something that brings me happiness or meant something to me, and then having failed at it is even more vulnerable than just sharing the hard part, is because behind the
Hmm.
hard part was like I actually genuinely wanted this to happen. Like I've been scared to share like happy news in my life because like, but what if it doesn't work out? I'm trying not to care about it. Um, like I care a lot about privacy, and I realize that part of that is because I don't want people to even know about the happy things going on in my life, because if they do, then perhaps like they're like, "Oh, how did it go with the PhD?" and like, "What if I didn't get into any programs?" You know, like I would be really sad because I worked really hard at that.
Right.
And I'm reminded as you're talking about the plan of salvation, our whole purpose here is to fail. Um, there was the scripture, Ben. I don't know if you remember it. It's just coming off the top of my head. I'm totally paraphrasing here, but like when the whole honor code thing went down at BYU, I was like really excited and I felt really seen. But it was also really hard when the whole like reversal stuff happened, and that was something that I felt I was failing at because I had been working at BYU to try and help make it a better place, and it was outside of my control. And Ben and me and a few other friends, we were just chatting, and the scripture came to our mind, and it's like Dr. Carmen's like 1:23:17, I think. And it's something like, "Wherefore, dearly beloved, let us cheerfully do all in our power, and then when we stand still with the utmost assurance to see the salvation of God and for his arm to be revealed."
That was
And
awesome. That was like 95% right. You got the reference right too.
oh,
Nice.
it's like the spirit is
No
here.
failure here.
Well, actually, I did fail a little bit, and I think that's the idea. But I did my best, and I tried, and yada yada yada. Like it's the whole point of this. Like I remember feeling that scripture and just feeling like, you know what, I'm doing everything I can. This sucks right now, and it does, and life is gonna suck. But I feel so close to God right now, even in this super sucky moment. and I feel close to my friends, and I feel close to my loved ones, and this sucks, but I'm gonna keep on trying. And I did. I went and got another degree and graduated from BYU again.
Yeah, and I think that's such a powerful truth that we can just do our best. What I love about that scripture, it says, "Cheerfully do all things that lie in our power, and then may we stand still with the utmost assurance to see the salvation of God and for His honor to be revealed." It's like in the end, this is God's work and His power, and we are His work and His glory. And so if we're just cheerfully doing what we can trust that God will ultimately do His work. And I think that goes along with what you're saying, Charlie. We're meant to come here and try things and fail, but ultimately it's through the atonement of Jesus Christ and His power and His grace that all of our failures will be turned for our good and be sanctified.
Yeah. You're saying to trust the process, Ben.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is really hard when you're in the middle of the process. I think about like 30-year-old me who felt like everything was failing in his life, and someone saying, "Oh, Ben, like trust the process. God's going to sanctify this." I would have been like, "I know you're right, but this still sucks right now." And
Yeah.
just like allowing things to be hard while they're hard, and just like walk with the people that you got with you, and it won't be so hard in the future.
Can I share thoughts of something you just said, Ben? It just occurred to me that like the times that's been the hardest, like I logically knew when the whole honor code thing went down, and you probably logically knew when you got fired from your job, and Charlie, you logically knew that like when you didn't win the election that you would be fine, but like it still sucked, and like at least for me it hurt and it was hard. Um, and so part of it is of course logically knowing that we're going to be okay this month salvation, but also just validating that it might suck and that that's part of our baptismal covenants is to I like I like to think of it like mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort, even when it's outside of your comfort zone. So even if you don't understand, like for example, like um, I remember that um, I had a boyfriend and we broke up, and that was really hard for me. And I was talking to it with a friend, and I knew that she didn't support the idea of me dating. Um, and she shared with me, she's like, you know what, I don't understand why this is so painful, but I want you to know that I can see the pain in you and I recognize how hard this is. Please let me know how I can be here for you right now. And thinking that we don't need to totally fix the issue. And in fact, we shouldn't fix the issue. Like Ben, when you were saying, like, people told you, like, when you're 30, like, yeah, but it sucks now. Like, you logically knew it was going to get better, but effective, like, but right now it's not. And this is an opportunity for, I feel like this friend of mine in that opportunity helped me draw closer to Christ and helped me feel loved, even when she didn't change her mind about things or what she believed. Does that make any sense?
Hmm. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it is really helpful when there's other people with you. I mean, both of you shared experiences where having somebody else with you in your low moments helped. I also think it's really important to not wear failure goggles. Cut that, Mike. Okay. I also think it's really important to not wear failure goggles. I think we do that a lot, and I actually, as we've been talking, thought of like two ways that it's possible. I thought of another one of my failures that ultimately became a success when I had to trust the process. A couple months ago, I made my wedding cake, and it was like this six-tier like masterpiece. It was a huge cake. I had like this really big vision for it. And I was collaborating with like a local baker. She's a BYU student, and we were like having fun and we were making this cake and it was going really well. And then like 75% in, things just started going so wrong. Like one of the cakes like slid and was like falling off, and then we were like, oh my gosh, and it just all of a sudden everything. We've spent so much time and effort and money on it, and then we were almost done, and Ryan's sister was making mac and cheese for her little kid. He's like 3, and she was telling a story with the spatula to her, like her nanny, and she was like, and I just like couldn't believe. And when she like made a big hand gesture, and the mac and cheese spatula like slammed into the cake that was sitting on the counter, like one of the ones that was done. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I was like, everything's going wrong. And this like nice girl that I'm decorating the cake with is like on the verge of like an emotional breakdown. And we just went through it. We're like, it was an accident. We don't care. We'll just redecorate that one. And we did, and it was better when we redid it. And we just kept working on it, and we kept like almost crying, but not. And then at the end, we finished, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. Like, it's so pretty. And then we were like so giddy and happy, and it'd been like 13 hours or whatever. So at the wedding, it got covered in flowers. It was gorgeous. It's in this beautiful setting. It was professionally photographed. The photos I have of this cake are immaculate. Like, they look like I can't even explain to you how perfect it looks.
Can you send me that?
And no, no, the mac and cheese is gone. But
Absolutely.
that's what people are going to see, right? That's what everyone at the wedding. There were like almost 1,000 people there. It was a big wedding, and everyone saw like this perfect cake, and they didn't see like the blood, sweat, and tears behind it. And I think that's really indicative of like what happens. Like rarely, like when I wrote my book, and everyone's like, you Joey mentioned people like comparing themselves to me for writing a book. Like nobody knows how many nights I stayed up, how many meetings, how many times the book got denied. Like the failure, like the failure goggles keep us seeing our own failures and never being realistic about the process that somebody else went through to get there. And so I think if you're doing that, anybody else who compares their wedding cake that they made to the one I made or whatever, like you just can't do that because that'll just make you feel like crap the whole time. Um, so that's like one failure goggles. Do either of you have like a comment on that? Because I do have another failure goggle.
No, I think it's really good to understand like no one's life is going to be perfect. So if we're comparing ourselves to someone else's life, like that's just going to be unhealthy and unrealistic. Like I think if we could see into the like deep recesses of everyone's life, like everyone's life, it has a large measure of disappointment in it and unmet expectations, and then that's even like for people who have like good, wonderful, beautiful lives. Like everyone's life has had disappointments in it and hard
Hmm.
times. So I think if we could actually see everyone's lived experience, we would probably be a lot kinder to those around us and ultimately to ourselves.
Yeah, and I feel like you have to realize that everybody else is a child of God who chose the plan of salvation. So everybody else is failing, and they are like came to earth to fail. So, and I don't know, it speaks a lot to perfectionism culture and like social media and church culture, like dressing up and getting pretty for church. And like, I think there's a lot of ways that our culture like feigns perfectionism. But if you like really believe that we're all equal children of God, then you have to be super honest with yourself about the fact that everybody fails. Everybody meets disappointment. Everybody, like, nobody courageous ever feels courageous. Like, nobody who's ever done anything successful feels like they merit that level of success. And so I think if you're wearing those goggles that say, I'm the one who fails and everybody else has got their stuff together, like, that's just like purposely making yourself feel like crap.
Hmm.
And I do believe like I do believe in empathy and compassion and um I guess self-compassion. But I don't believe in self-loathing, and I do believe in positive psychology. And like we can't always control like what happens or our emotional reaction, but we can choose the way we respond to things. We can choose what we say to ourselves. And if we choose to tell ourselves lies, like I'm a failure, I never get anything right, and back it up with like evidence from all the other times we failed, like why would you not choose to back it up with evidence of the times that you've persevered or been courageous or stuck it out or found success, you know? Like I
What,
really believe that we can choose the angle we look at ourselves with.
especially when the angle I might be looking at myself with is like maybe like I'm thinking of behind the scenes of all the things. Oh, but they don't know that I got this wrong, and comparing it to all the external like
Mm-hmm.
compliments or like validations that I'm getting. For example, like all the people who compliment you on your book, Charlie, they don't know all the times it was rejected or how many nights you stayed up for these things. And so it's like that balance of taking the external validation, I guess, while also like being like, you know what, I am doing pretty good. You know, like I've tried, and maybe they don't know that, but that doesn't mean that because they don't know about my failures that I'm somehow like lying or failure or imposter or
Right.
whatever. Um,
Well, and it also goes back to like, what are you using to judge whether or not you're a failure, right? Like
mm,
other people's perception of you doesn't determine whether or not you're a failure. Like you get to decide that.
mm,
And that can be really difficult, but at the end of the day, like you and the people around you, like the few people that you really care about, like that's who matters. And if you can draw from that internal place of self-worth, then it'll be a lot easier to take off those comparison failure goggles and be like, oh, no, I actually feel super confident with who I am, and I'm not failing because I'm trying.
mm.
And I think I think you only fail if you give up,
That sounds
you
like something
know.
on a throw pillow once.
Exactly. It's true. Like all of these are like little sayings like nobody's perfect. That's a Hannah Montana song. Like people have been struggling with this concept since the beginning of time,
Mm.
right? We're not unique in this, but there's power there because of it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's true.
and I
Nobody's perfect. You got to work it again and again until you get it right.
Shut up, you look good. Yeah.
I actually had a Hannah Montana singing pen that sang that song every time you clicked it. Anyway, that's a tangent. But Charlie, what are some practical ways that, or Joe even, what are some practical ways someone can take off these failure goggles? Like, what can people actually do if they're like, oh, I had these goggles on. What do I do? How do I take them off?
um I had like a story that I actually like. It's a great leadway question to like a story I thought about sharing. Which I think I can share. It involves someone else, but they've given me permission, so I think it's fine. Um,
Just give
we
them
can edit
just give us
out.
their name and address first.
Okay, okay, and their social security number. Which actually could give their name and address because I live there. It's about Austin. So, who's been on the podcast before? So, Elder Holland gave this. Am I allowed to say his name? Is that okay?
Wait,
There
Austin's
was
name or Elder Holland's name?
Elder Holland.
Elder
I
Holland.
think you're allowed to say his name. Yeah.
I
Okay.
need to determine if it was okay to share Austin's name.
No, I found Elder Holland. Like, so he gave. So, anyways, there was a devotional by Elder Holland that was really impactful to me, and it hurt me a lot. And it like, I think it hurt me less than it did of like I just knew how certain people were reading this and interpreting this, and that certain people started using that as kind of like ammo against me, and it really hurt when I was just trying to do my best. And it happened on a Monday. And on Monday nights, we had this like scripture reading group with Austin and a few of his friends. And Ben, you had just left, and one of our friends, Bert, just turned and asked me, was like, "Hey, yeah, like that thing happened today. Like, how are you doing?" And this is a group of people that I've known for maybe 6 weeks, right? But Austin has known them for many years, and it's a few other people, and I just remember being like, do you want my polite answer or do you want my real answer? And they're like, the real answer, obviously. And I just like started bawling about how hard it was and how I feel like I've been trying so hard to like make this work. And I feel like every time I feel like I've reached a point of congruency, something happens outside of my control. And then all of a sudden, everyone is commenting on opinions about like what I should do, who I am, or what I have or have not done. And just feeling just really alone. And um, I'm like crying with like, I don't know, 4 to 5, not strangers, but people I don't know very well. And I said, like, I'm really sorry about, um, like, I know you all don't know me that well, but I'm still really grateful that you've taken this time to listen to me when I feel like I'm a mess. And one of the members there of the group, Tad, which I've only seen like twice since that one time, and she turned to me and she's like, I don't feel bad at all. Like, I'm grateful to be able to be here with you because we love you and we're your friend, and we just want to hear you. And as much as I was sitting there crying, feeling like, oh, this sucks, I look over in the corner and there's Austin, who's also crying, and he's closeted, and no one knows. These are all his friends he's had for years. That no one knows that, you know, he's gay. I mean, I know, and I think Ben, you knew at that point.
Mhm.
And all these things, they've been complimenting me and like supporting me and validating me all, and like the fact they're doing this with a random stranger meant something for Austin too. And so, as far as like taking off the failure goggles, I think part of taking off the failure goggles for me has been like taking off the perfectionist goggles and like being okay with that I'm a failure and sharing those things instead of like hiding them. Because by sharing those things, like in that moment, by sharing what was hard, not even a way that I thought I could have imagined, it helped someone. Like I couldn't have even like planned that Austin's like 4 to 5 like closest friends were all there that night, that day that something happened, and he's closeted, no one knows, and here they are like supporting me and in an indirect way supporting him. And I wish I could hear his thoughts on it, but I just know that it was meaningful, um, to me and to him. I think even more to him. So by sharing, it's kind of like why I decided to do the podcast and be here. It's like by sharing the ways in which we failed, it like we humanize ourselves and we give permission for other people to do the same.
Yeah.
Love that. Thank you, Joey. And that's awesome. You know, that's such a good example of how by showing like love and kindness and concern and compassion for one person, we're actually helping all the people around us who see us doing that indirectly for them or like to them.
Yep. Another thing I was thinking about is I feel like if you're trying to find self-fulfillment in an outcome, then it's
Mm.
likely never going to happen. And I think that kind of ties to this other, like the other failure goggles that I was thinking of. I've worked with a lot of LGBTQ individuals, and it seems like many, myself included sometimes, feel like all of our problems stem from our orientation somehow because it's so like convoluted in our lives. Like it's a part of who we are. So I feel like sometimes it gives like an inaccurate view of the pain we go through. And I really don't want that to sound like invalidating to like real discrimination and real pain that comes from a minority identity. However, I've just seen time and time again how sometimes people um, over, you know what I'm trying to say, Ben?
Mhm.
Like it's like everyone has pain and they like overvalue the pain that comes from their orientation. And I think that can be really destructive internally if you're like under the guise that every negative emotion you ever have comes from this part of you that you don't have control over. That can be really disempowering. And so I think it's important to accurately view like who you are and like what's actually happening. A lot of people I work with have depression or anxiety or divorced parents or have lost a loved one, and there's like untapped grief. And all of these things, they like, because the orientation one is visible and understandable, they like attach every bad thing they've ever felt to that thing and call it the same bucket, but it's not. Um, and so I think when that happens, they're thinking, well, if I just come out, then all my problems will go away. If I just transition, all my problems will go away. If I just date, or if I don't date, or like whatever this outcome is with my identity or orientation, they think that's going to solve everything and then they're going to feel fulfilled. But that's not true. So,
I've seen that with parents too of queer kids. Like Ben, you and I both read a book called "This Is How It Always Is," and it's a novel, but it's called that way because these parents like they have a trans kid after having 4 kids, and kind of like the main thesis of the book is like there's going to be these issues, and of course, as you said, Charlie, not to minimize all the things that come with the discrimination and like the prejudice and these things, but how like sometimes, at least for me, the times in which I have felt like almost most validated with different parts of my identity and not like has been the times where it wasn't about me being gay, or being queer or whatever, and that someone just validated that, and that they didn't try and make it about my identity either. Like they just saw pain and like, I don't get why, and I don't want to assume why you're feeling this, but I can understand feeling alone or feeling like a failure or whatever. Um, like even within this conversation, right? Like as far as I know, neither of you identify as trans or genderqueer in any way, but I have felt validated by both of you at times and like have felt supported, and it didn't have to do with my identity. And of course, there's a shared queer identity, but um, I think part of that is just feeling like misunderstood or just feeling alone, or just even the things we've been talking about now. I'm like, yes, that's how I felt. Yes, exactly. Beautiful. Ben, you were going to say something earlier before I cut you off.
I was just thinking that it's really good and healthy. I think like you all were saying, to try and see ourselves holistically. To look at the different aspects of our lives and what's happening, and really take some time to dig into what we're doing, who we're becoming, and the ways we're both succeeding and failing, and also trusting that this is all a long process. So like building a meaningful life is something that takes time, but the moment we start, like God is there helping us. Charlie, your favorite book is The Alchemist, correct?
Mm-hmm.
There's this line in it that says like it's something about like the universe conspiring to help you. What's the line?
I don't know. That's like a theme in the book.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's like these omens, and like the universe wants to help this kid, you know, like things will come together, and it's like a journey, but at the end, like you got to trust the goodness there.
Yeah, yeah, and I just like that. I think is something that's true. That when we like are sincerely trying, like the universe, and in this case God, conspires to help us move forward, and to help us make it happen. And that doesn't mean it's an easy journey. Like it's a journey, but still there's heavenly power there that is like wanting us to succeed.
Um, there was a question you asked earlier, Ben, about like ways in which we can, what was it, take off the failure goggles or perfectionist goggles. And I thought of another way. It's like by asking for help. I was just thinking about a professor I had who really struggled with my pronouns, got them wrong over and over again. It was really hurtful and really hard. And I felt I was failing communicating how to use my pronouns. Um, and I look back, and of course he felt he was failing by getting it wrong, and he came up with this great idea. We're in a 10 student class, really small, he announced it in front of the class. He's like, first, I think I need to publicly apologize because I publicly have hurt Joey. And I was like dumbfounded. This is like a full professor at BYU. And then he said, and I need help of how to get Joey's pronouns. And obviously I'm not trying to put the responsibility on any of you. However, I would like to reward you for helping me. Every time I get Joey's pronouns wrong, 10 points will go to the first person that corrects me immediately, not after class, immediately. We'll get 10 bonus points. And he's like, and it turned into almost this game. And he's like, and it's either I'll get Joey's pronouns down or you'll all have the highest grade that I've ever given. Right. And
10 points for Hufflepuff.
Wait, say that again. Sorry.
And lots of points for Hufflepuff, I'm sure.
Yes. And there's a lot of Ravenclaws. This was graduate school, And it became this fun game where like people weren't scared themselves to go out and to like be like, oh, it's it's they or it's them. And then at the same time they started correcting each other, even though they weren't getting extra credit points. They just felt comfortable doing so. And I just took this huge burden off of me where I didn't feel like I was feeling anymore because I had done my best to try and explain it. And then at the same time, the professor, he was also doing his best. And it turned into this beautiful opportunity where everyone was okay with making mistakes and messing up my pronouns because they had all seen it and they had all publicly acknowledged it. And then they would be there and support each other. And it almost gave permission to mess up and gave permission to keep trying. And it was just like this beautiful thing. So like to be able to ask for help then also provides another person opportunity to also ask for help as well. Like the best thing you can do when ministering is to not just what do you need, but also ask them to help you almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which awesome. Of course it does. I just am feeling like I'm failing at communicating this.
So thank you for sharing your stories. And there's just a story from the scriptures that came to mind as I was considering this episode. And it's probably no surprise, but I was thinking of the story of Nephi. And I think in 2nd Nephi chapter 4, we get a very clear sense of someone who felt like a failure. The chapter starts out with Lehi giving his final blessing, and then Lehi dies, and then Laman and Lemuel and Nephi and Sam and their families they separate, and everything has really literally fallen apart. Like Nephi's supposed to be the leader, and he's fallen apart, and he's this is when he says, "Oh wretched man that I am." And then in 2 Nephi 4 verses 18 and 19, he says, "I am compassed about because of the temptations and the sins which do so easily beset me. And when I desire to rejoice, my heart groaneth because of my sins." I think that's such a relatable thing. Like he wants to be happy, he wants to rejoice, and yet he's groaning because of these mistakes he feels he's making. And he says, "Nevertheless, I know in whom I have trusted." And I know 2 Nephi chapter 4 is a favorite for many Latter-day Saints, because they get they feel that way. Like they feel sometimes like, "Oh wretched man that I am, I want to rejoice, but I groan." And Nephi is experiencing not just the failure of in his mind, that the sins he's committing, the temptations he has, but also the ways that he didn't keep his family together. And that's really hard. He says, "But I know in whom I've trusted. I trust in God." But still, those feelings as you read the chapter come up again and again of like, I feel like I'm failing, but God is there and helping me and blessing me. And I'm just really grateful for the people who have allowed me to express times when I feel like I'm struggling and failing, and who were there to lift me up and trust me and help me take the next step and try again.
Yeah.
Take the next right step. We can cut that out. It's just a Frozen 2 reference.
I think, Ben, what you're trying to say is, shut up, you look good.
Yes, I mean this tween room has been so good for me.
Shut up, everyone, you're not failing.
You might feel like you are, but you're doing better than you think. You're here right now. You're listening to the podcast. You're doing something, and that's meaningful. There's a great devotional by J.B. Hawes, Wrestling with Comparisons, that I love, that if you'd like to hear more about feeling like a failure and comparing, you can listen to. But other than that, thanks for allowing me to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for letting me share my failures. And thank you for sharing yours too.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joey. We'll catch everyone next time.
Thank you for joining us today. If you have enjoyed this or other episodes, please consider leaving a review, following us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Questions from the Closet, or sharing this podcast with someone you love. And as always, please remember that we do not represent the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or Brigham Young University. We're not trying to be prescriptive or tell anyone what to think or what to do.
You heard 3 perspectives, and there are many, many more. We encourage you to listen to other voices and hear a wide variety of experiences. If you would like to submit a question or share a comment about today's episode, you can email us at questionsfromthecloset@gmail.com.
Until next time.